Injuries are destroying our fantasy teams, but we are here to help you find gems off the waivers. We discuss the best waiver wire pickups heading into week 4 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we are going to go through the waiver wire pickups, our top priorities, guys we're considering picking up, your quarterback, tight end, defensive streamers of the week. We'll get into all that, but let's talk about Monday Night Football for a really quick second because it was a great night for fantasy. Jaden Daniels is that dude. Terry McLaurin finally goes off with him. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase did their thing against Commanders defense like we thought they would. Josh Allen's played lights out. The real only disappointing fantasy team were the Jaguars. I mean, Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars stink. I don't know what to do there. But Vinny, your boy, Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels, talk about them.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I was very excited to see that combination get going. Cliff Kingsbury, I think he slow played it a bit, right? The first two games, they were trying to get a feel for what they wanted to do offensively. Then everything exploded in Cincinnati. They knew exactly what they're doing. Luke McCaffrey's the underneath guy. We thought that was going to happen, where he's going to eat the targets in the slot, as well as Zach Ertz at tight end. And then we had Austin Eckler. This running game's been fantastic, the traditional running game. Unfortunately, Eckler got hurt, but we did see Brian Robinson Jr. He looks great. Jayden Daniels seems to be in complete command of this offense. They're scheming it up really well, where a lot of guys are open, and this running game is really effective. So it's opening up things downfield. Terry McLaurin was running downfield. Maybe Cam Taylor-Britt should not talk about the next opponent here. They're playing Andy Dalton and the Panthers. So maybe that's a mistake. Maybe just don't trash talk where we're playing. They called it a college offense. McLaurin just dusted him for a long play, and then they came back with a touchdown to put the game away. So this is the offense where I thought the Commanders could unlock it. And this is going to be a fun week this week because you have Michelle's favorite there, Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. You got this combination that I liked all season long. I love both of these combinations. Well, they're going to go at it against two bad defenses here. So I think it's going to continue. It's going to be a lot of fun. And again, good offensive systems with talent are going to help you produce in fantasy. And Cliff Kingsbury, it's been the case wherever he's at. Well, he's been in two places, but two places have been very fruitful for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels is exactly what we wanted him to be for fantasy. And he looked fantastic last night. The Bengals defense is going to be one to target because, oh my goodness, they couldn't stop anything. It was crazy. The Bills, I mean, Josh Allen, MVP top candidate right now. I know it's only 3 weeks in, but he's playing lights out. But let's get into the waiver wire pickups for this week. Starting right off the top, I just wanted to bring up Darnell Mooney. He's not going to be heavily talked about here because he's 60% rostered, but still 40% available. He should be rostered in every league. He's getting the targets, 7 and 8 targets over the last 2 games, 88 yards and a touchdown in week 2, 8 receptions, 66 yards in week 3. He is, Kirk Cousins likes to go to him. He should be rostered.
Yeah, he's the guy that we thought could really benefit, right? Because Kirk Cousins, he's a guy who likes to throw in the middle of the field. He likes to get deep shots. Mooney can do both of those things here really well. He's a very technically sound route runner. With the Bears, the only question was staying healthy and the quarterback situation. Now he's got both things in his favor here. So, again, these players are merging because of the system. I mean, we saw that with Rashid Shaheed before he put up the 0 last week, but he was still getting targeted and had 2 big weeks before that. So those were 2 of the players we like to target late in drafts, and they're really coming through. And if they're sitting on your waiver wires, go pick them up. Shaheed still might be out there. People might have rage dropped him after last week after putting up the 0, but Mooney was in that category, right? A guy that is in an offense that they don't have a lot of weapons. He could be the third guy. That's what we've seen with both these players. And it's going to continue, I think, with Mooney. I don't think you're going to expect a very high ceiling with this guy, but the floor is going to be pretty high. He had the big play against the Eagles, and then had a very solid night there against the Chiefs.
Now, one guy that, is going to be heavily sought after this week is Jauan Jennings, the 49ers wide receiver, after his monster week, 175 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Rams. Now, they get the Patriots and the Cardinals next 2 weeks, so it's 2 good matchups. The thing is, Debo, I think will miss at least 1 more week. It was called like a 3-week injury. He's only missed 1 week so far, so he should be out this week. Kittle suffered that hamstring injury late last week, so we'll see if he can play. There is some optimism around that, but how hard are you going for Jauan Jennings, knowing that, he's probably kind of here on like a timetable of when he's going to be unusable again?
Yeah, it's very tough because we don't exactly when all these guys are going to return. But then again, we had the opportunity to go to Brandon Ayuk in this game, and Brock Purdy chose Jennings. And maybe that's a little bit of loyalty, right, for being around in camp and having a connection develop. That was a good thing that developed, where Ayuk was not happy to be around. Jennings was happy to be there and do things, and he got re-signed. So maybe it's a bit of a reward for that. He's one of those scrappy players the 49ers have liked that has been key, and they keep retaining him. So he obviously has plus talent. We saw in the Super Bowl. We saw in this game. So maybe he's earned himself a bigger role in this offense going forward. Now, it's really hard to feed all those mouths, but Samuel, we know he's older, could have injuries lingering. Kittle has had issues with soft tissues and hamstrings before. So this could linger for both of them before they're at full speed. And we know Christian McCaffrey could be out, and they're not throwing much to Jordan Mason. So they got to replace some targets. Jennings is the guy short to intermediate. So at least you can play him the short term. Really good matchup against the Patriots this week, who really struggled with a similar receiver in Al Lazard last week.
Yeah, if you're dealing with injuries to the wide receiver position, Jauan Jennings should be someone you're definitely going after hard. Now, what about Tutu Atwell, Rams wide receiver? I think as long as Cooper Kupp is out, he's going to have some really solid weeks. Like, it's not going to be anything crazy, but we've now seen when Cooper Kupp is out, Tutu Atwell is that guy. He was from weeks 1 through 4 last season. He was on the field for over 72% of snaps in week 3 and led the team in receiving yards. It does seem like Cooper Kupp is going to miss at least this week, but also at the same time, they get a bye shortly here. So the Rams get the Bears and the Packers the next 2 weeks and then a bye. I would expect Cooper Kupp to sit out until after that bye. So I think Tutu is a solid pickup for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and you just know from last year that once Cooper Kupp is back, it's going to be really hard to trust him. But that said here that there's not a lot going on. Demarcus Robinson has kind of been the big play guy. Atwell had a chance to throw the ball to Robinson. I mean, I just don't think these other guys are totally into the offense yet. They're getting a few touches here and there. Colby Parkinson is not a thing really at tight end. So you have Jordan Whittington, Tyler Johnson. Atwell has experience with Matthew Stafford. That's what you're seeing here. And what I like about him, he can get away from those matchups. The Bears are tough on the outside. You have the Packers with Jair Alexander. So Atwell can kind of be the short area guy, make some big plays after the catch, avoid that in the slot. So the next 2 weeks really could be crucial. And again, Cooper Kupp, who knows? I mean, he's a little bit older. This injury, we know what happened last year, dragged out. So just keep that in mind. He might have a little bit more value, just like Jennings, because again, we can't see the future too much with these injuries.
Yeah, and I think Jennings has a better chance of actually being like usable throughout the year than Tutu Atwell does. So definitely Jennings over Atwell. But again, Atwell is an option to play over the next 2 weeks if you need someone with these injuries. And then Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard is going to be a big pickup this week. He 21 carries, 114 yards, 5 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown. Like, this Panthers offense is clicking with with Andy Dalton in the backfield, not Bryce Young. I will say, though, if you're going to spend up on picking him up, because he does get the Bengals this week, it's an amazing matchup. I get it, but Jonathan Brooks could be back in week 5, and you would expect, like, Hubbard should still lead the backfield for a little bit, but it's going to get hard to play him once Brooks is back.
Yeah, I mean, Miles Sanders got the touchdown later. It could have been a massive game for Hubbard. And the Bengals, we saw, their defensive front is really beat up. So this is a good opportunity at home to keep it going with Hubbard. We saw with Brian Robinson Jr. in that Commanders front. It wasn't necessarily the biggest, best offensive line doing that to the Bengals. And now you have the Panthers, who invested quite a bit in their offensive line, Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt. So they can actually do some things up front inside to power Hubbard. So I think Hubbard puts together a very nice day. And what I like about Jennings, Atwell, Hubbard, and Mooney, these are all guys that you can play right away. If you need help, you can pick them up, plug them and play them. And we'll have a few more of those guys we'll talk about as well. So that's good, because you just want to sit on everybody. You want to use people when you're hurting on your roster, and these guys all give you that option.
Absolutely. We'll get into the next tier of waiver wire pickups that we're eyeing here, and we'll let you know if we would consider picking them up this week right after a short break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality and qualified professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. That's what we're trying to do here on Waiver Wire Tuesday. We're trying to get some help on our teams, and you need to find the right mix of help. You need to see where you're weak and get strong and find the right combination people to work for you. Well, LinkedIn is going to provide that for your small business. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role in your organization. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't wait and visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86%, that's right, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Make sure you're one of them. Post your job for free, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show. And one guy that we thought, oh, well, how is he going to get targets in this offense? It's loaded here. But Keenan Allen's got hurt. We're still figuring out some things in this offense. But Cole Kmet, okay, we thought he was going to be sharing with Gerald Everett. That's not been the case. But Kmet is just a good talent. And I think that's why they said, okay, we got to unlock this guy. We need somebody in the middle of the field. And we saw that. And again, I don't know why they didn't do this earlier. Caleb Williams looked great with Kmet in the preseason. So we finally saw it. I think it continues here for him in Chicago.
Yeah, I tried to rank the tight ends this week, and man, was it gross. So there's a good chance you're really desperate for a tight end. And if that's the case, you got to go after Cole Kmet. Like you brought up, like they weren't utilizing him as much in the first 2 weeks. For whatever reason, they're trying to make Gerald Everett a thing. Kmet ran 41 routes to Everett's 40 routes from weeks 1 through 2 combined. So 41 routes for Kmet through weeks 1 through 2. And then in week 3, Kmet ran 41 routes. He took over with Everett only running 17 routes, and we saw what he did: 11 targets, 10 receptions, 97 yards, and a receiving touchdown. It's not going to be this pretty every week. Like it's not. It's Cole Kmet, but with the routes he's going to start getting, hopefully they stick to this. There's no reason they don't. He's a good bet. And their next 6 games, this is how it goes: Rams, Panthers, Jaguars, Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots. I mean, all games you're not going to be worried about playing any of these Bears players. So I really like picking up Cole Kmet with how gross the tight end group is this year. Now let's move on to some running backs. I want you to rank these guys for me, Vinny. We got Bucky Irving, rookie running back for the Buccaneers; Braelon Allen, rookie running back for the Jets; and Emanuel Wilson, the backup running back for the Packers. How would you rank them in the order of who you want to pick up heading into week 4?
Yeah, I think it has to be Braelon Allen first because he can play independent of Breece Hall. I mean, you don't need to worry about Breece Hall having an injury because this team is going through only a few people. And the wide receivers are a bit of a mix behind Garrett Wilson. Tyler Conklin, we'll talk about him in a little bit. He looks like a mainstay in the passing game, but they need to put the ball in the hands of their best players. And Allen and Hall are those players, right? They open things up for Aaron Rodgers. He loves Allen. They love Allen, pounding him through that offensive line. So I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities. What could happen here is Breece Hall, a lot of games, could be their leading receiver in terms of receptions and yards. Allen could be their leading rusher. Both of them have a shot at scoring a touchdown in any given week. So I love the standalone kind of nice rookie flex value of Braelon Allen. Now, the others that might surprise you, I do like Emanuel Wilson. The problem is we're not sure about Marshawn Lloyd. Is he going to come back? We know A.J. Dillon's out of the picture, but one thing I will say is Josh Jacobs, it's a grind for him to do anything. And so I don't know if he's just worn down and he's washed, but I feel like something's going to happen and he's going to break down. And Wilson, they shot him out of a cannon. He just looks so explosive there against the Titans. So again, I think they wanted some more explosiveness. Not having A.J. Dillon is probably a good thing where they can get some big runs there. So Jacobs just looks a little washed. And then In the other situation, I don't know if they're going to quit Rachaad White all that early if we're looking for. I think we want them to, and we want to force Bucky Irving into existence, into being their lead back. But I think it's going to be this committee. This running game is not all that good. So in the end, I think Irving, we need him to have a bigger role or something to happen to White. Because, again, this running game is not inspiring. It wasn't inspiring for all of last year. So if they're not getting the receptions and they're splitting that work, it's really not a playable backfield.
I will say, I think Bucky is the only guy from this group who has a chance to take over his team's like lead back role without the injury to the original starter. So if you need to play this week, it's Braelon Allen. They get the Broncos. He should get a good amount of carries. Like, he's talented. And Braelon Allen definitely has the biggest upside if anything happens to his starter, right? Like, if Breece Hall were to get injured, Braelon Allen would be a league winner. So I'm fine with picking up Braelon Allen. I will mention, though, after the Broncos game, they get the Vikings, Bills, and Steelers for 3 straight weeks. I'm just not starting Braelon Allen in any of those matchups if Breece Hall is healthy. Bucky Irving is just so much better than Rachaad White. White has 31 carries, 66 rushing yards. He's averaging 2.1 yards per carry this season. Bucky Irving, on the other hand, has 150 rushing yards, 154 rushing yards on 25 carries. He's averaging 6.2 yards per carry, 4th in the NFL. They need to get him more work, and I think they will if they want to be better. Emanuel Wilson, it's interesting. He has the talent, but I don't think every game is going to be like that Titans game where they're blowing them out and getting to run both guys so much, especially when Jordan Love is back. So I'm not super needy to go get Emanuel Wilson. It's Braelon Allen if I need to play this week, then Bucky Irving if I'm stashing someone, and then Emanuel Wilson, if there's no one else. I will say, keep an eye on Najee Harris's injury report. He was wearing a sling on Monday. It sounds like he's going to be fine. But then also Jaylen Warren couldn't finish week 3 because he was banged up. He's questionable to play. Cordero Patterson is a playable guy if Jaylen Warren doesn't play. Really think he is because he gets the receptions as well. Let's move over to wide receiver. There's 3 guys I wanted to ask you about. Jalen Tolbert for the Cowboys, Quentin Johnston for the Chargers, but we don't know what's going on with Justin Herbert's injury. He has scored 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, though. Or Josh Downs, who finally just got back from injury, only played about 50% of the snaps, but I do expect him to get more involved. How would you rank these 3 guys that you could pick up off waivers?
Yeah, the Cowboys are back to their old tricks of having high passing volume, and Tolbert looks involved. I mean, maybe Brandon Cooks is being slowly worked out of it a little bit more. They've liked Tolbert, and I think they pushed him. Remember, he had a lot of hype as a rookie, and then it kind of subsided, and then he got out there, and he disappointed that he can stay healthy. But I think that you're seeing some of why they liked him, right? Like, he's a pretty good receiver, and I think they're going to keep having passing volume because their running game stinks. I mean, Rico Dowdle has been better, but he's done most of his damage as a receiver. Ezekiel Elliott stinks, and this defense stinks. So they're going to have to throw a lot. I mean, they cannot stop the run right now. They're really missing Deron Bland in coverage. So high volume. Dak Prescott is going to be playing from behind and throwing 30 to 40 times. He's got to get the ball to Jalen Tolbert. So I think he's number 1 for me easily. And I've liked this kid for a while. Now he's putting it all together. Quentin Johnson, I loved him last week when Justin Herbert was around, and he paid off right away. He scored a touchdown, but we don't know what's going to happen here. Taylor Heineke or Easton Stick. So stay tuned there. But Johnson, again, very low. This is the difference, right? I think Johnson's a better talent. He's going to score, but it's a much lower volume passing game now with the Chargers, even with Herbert out, than you get with the Cowboys. So that's kind of the thing you have to balance and worry about. Now, last you look at Josh Downs. Do I want to attach myself to the Colts passing game right now? That's the question. I don't know if I do. Like, Michael Pittman is stinking. So do I want to extend to Josh Downs when you have Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell? Do I really want anything other than Jonathan Taylor? That's the question I have to really ask myself. Like, what is the upside here at Downs? Like, the player's good. Maybe you're just hoping that they put Richardson on the bench for a while and get Joe Flacco in there to treat him like Amari Cooper. And we'll see if that would happen for the Colts.
That's what I was just going to say. If, the Colts end up doing what the Panthers did, Downs to Joe Flacco would be very, very interesting. If you need to play this week, Downs is not your guy. He gets the Steelers. You're not playing him. But after that, Jaguars, Titans, Dolphins, I don't mind those matchups. We got to wait to see him get more usage as well and see Anthony Richardson not be so incredibly bad. I'm with you. Tolbert would be the top wide receiver here among this group by far. It's not going to be like a crazy high ceiling for him, but he has scored double-digit fantasy points in half PPR in both of the last 2 weeks, and it's going to be a heavy passing offense. Quentin Johnson is interesting with the touchdowns, and he looks good deep, but like they get the Chiefs this week. Herbert is hurt. I guess he might try to play, but then they get a bye week right after that.
Yeah.
Like I get not wanting to lose to the Chiefs and not having Herbert out there, but a bye week, you should really give Herbert those 2
Yeah.
weeks to recover. And if you can't play Johnson for the next 2 weeks, like there's no reason to pick him up just right now.
Yeah.
So Jalen Tolbert from this group, then Josh Downs if I can like hold him and wait, and then Johnston. Really quickly, any interest in Jahan Dotson or Paris Campbell from the Eagles if both AJ Brown and Devonta Smith miss week 4?
No, not at all. Because I don't know, like, who really is. Like, is Britton Covey out there? Like, who's the guy? And then they have Grant Calcaterra at tight end. They could go easily pivot to that with a lot of Dallas Goedert or just a lot of Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts on the ground, and that's how their formula is going to be. And remember that offense? The Eagles were so run heavy that one year, and then Nick Sirianni's like, what are they doing? And then they opened up the passing game. Well, they could pivot to being run heavy. And I think that's what you'll see. So Saquon, everything is lined up for Saquon because the passing weapons are falling apart. He's running well. Hurts is helping him. So Saquon is now like the top fantasy back on the board, and not just with his production, but going forward because of this. So more of Saquon, more of Goddard. I don't trust any of these other receivers.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust them in my normal leagues. Maybe in DFS, you want to throw in Dotson. He is playing nearly 70% of the snaps, doing absolutely nothing. But if both of those guys are out, maybe in DFS, if I need a super, super cheap play, I'd consider Jahan Dotson, but not in regular leagues. So I'm not picking him up on waivers. We are going to get into the best streaming quarterbacks of the week. Give you one streaming tight end. I'm sorry, but it is hard this week. And then some streaming defenses. We will get into all that to close out today's show. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel is super user-friendly. You can even, like in the middle of games, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's pretty insane that you just get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with a $5 bet, because then you have $200 to use throughout the NFL season to make any NFL game interesting. The same way that fantasy football makes games more interesting, that's the same thing when you have, a $5, $10 bet on the line or whatever you want to put out there. But it can truly make any night fun. To get started, you can visit FanDuel.com. And again, you place that first $5 bet. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Looking at the streaming quarterbacks, I will say one thing I did not expect going into week 4 would be we'd be talking about Sam Darnold and Andy Dalton as good possible plays. But Sam Darnold versus the Packers or Justin Fields versus the Colts. Let's start there. Which way would you go among those two guys?
Yeah, this will get into our defense conversation, but I really don't like either quarterback in that game. Sam Darnold, if Jordan Love returns, I don't know if I love it because the Packers defense, I think, is playing pretty well, and especially against the pass. You can run on the Packers, but the Vikings are not a very good running team, so that's going to hurt them. But they do have Aaron Jones in a bit of a revenge game situation this week, so I don't really like Sam Darnold this week. Again, it's in Green Bay. I think he comes down to earth a little bit in this game. I think he's been fortunate there. The Texans kind of broke down, but I think he's a guy you might be developing as someone you want to be more interested in when he's playing at home, right? Justin Fields, look, I'm way interested in him. He's going to run all over, I think, this Colts defense. I mean, we saw a little bit with Caleb Williams, and Fields is a much better athlete. It's kind of funny that Williams and Fields, they're the connection with the Bears, and they just go to Fields this week, and he's looking good as a passer. The Colts defense stinks. So I think you're going to see a lot of running, especially if Jalen Warren's out. It takes away the check down. It takes away the backup running back. So Fields can take off and kind of build on that rushing attack this week. So we haven't seen a 100-yard game yet as a Steeler. I think that could come this week. I'm going to call it right here. He gets 100 on the ground, and he breaks out, and I think he gets a passing touchdown as well. So I love Justin Fields this week, not just as a pickup, but as straight up. If you need help with quarterback, Superflex League, he's a must-start this week.
Yeah, I'm the same with Sam Darnold this week against the Packers. It's a hard matchup. They have intercepted both Hurts, Richardson, and Levis at least 2 times in their games this year. Sam Darnold, I know, has been good, but last week he had, it was like turnover from the Vikings defense, put him in amazing positions to score quickly. Didn't have to do all too much. And also, like, if you look at PFF, he's still one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks this season. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Packers pick him off a couple times and he struggles. Like, it feels very much, if you finally trust Sam Darnold, he's going to do what Derek Carr did to you last week. Like, a bad game's going to come, just like it did for Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. Sam Darnold is that same type of quarterback. And then Justin Fields, like you mentioned, a great matchup against the Colts. I'm a Steelers fan, but I'm telling you, like, this offense is different than it has been the last few years. I know the points still aren't there, but they're on the cusp. They really are. It's a completely different feel. There's been some bad penalties or whatever taking away points, but they're on the cusp of having huge games. So I do like Fields in this matchup. Now, what about Andy Dalton versus the Bengals? Revenge game. He puts up 25 points in his first start this year. Just hilarious. 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He gives you nothing as a rusher. He had -2 yards. But against the Bengals, who we just saw had no defense against the Commanders, would you consider starting Andy Dalton this week?
Yeah, just be careful with these guys, right? They're backups for a reason. I get he had to play because Bryce Young was terrible, but we know why they're on the bench. They have some limitations physically, and the Bengals might be mad. And the Bengals, again, their weakness was the running defense, and you could just really go nuts on them. So it could be a big Hubbard game. I'm just a little nervous because there's a wide range of outcomes, fantasy phrase right there, that I wouldn't be surprised if he has a clunker, throws 2 interceptions, and looks bad, and this Bengals pass rush gets him. That would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if he went 303 again. So be that your fate here if you go streaming one of these guys. Like, you just have to expect, because if you went back to the Baker Mayfield or Derek Carr, well, as you said, you can get burned. These guys have limitations, especially when they don't have the cheat code running ability. So I'd much rather look at Geno Smith, again, if he's available in your league. Like, they're playing in Detroit. He had a big game in there a couple years ago. He can run around and make some plays. And then how about Caleb Williams? Like, if someone just rage dropped him here after the first 2 weeks, I think he's golden here. Cole Kmet, we talked about him. Just Roma Dinze also catching fire. So I think I'd rather go with some of these younger guys with talent than maybe forcing these kind of bridge guys into my lineup.
Yeah, I would rather, like, if Caleb Williams is out there, he's rostered in just 55% of leagues. So that means 45% of leagues out there on ESPN. He's available. The Rams, he gets this week. Kyler Murray put up 29 points against them in week 2. Brock Purdy put up 26 points against them in week 3. Caleb Williams, he's up and down, but they're letting him throw like crazy. So he should have a nice week against the Rams. Now, one tight end we'll bring up, besides Cole Kmet, who we think is a good pickup for the year, right? It's not to say he's going to have great games every week, because no tight end does, but he should be solid throughout the year. But one guy to pick up for this week, considering the tight end position is so gross, it's Tyler Conklin against the Broncos. Conklin is running a ton of routes this year. He had a great game in week 3, 5 for 93 against the Patriots. The Broncos just gave Cade Otton a fine day, 7 receptions, 47 yards. He's an option this week.
Yeah, once you have the trust of Aaron Rodgers, you got to look at a player. And this clearly is a key guy for Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to suddenly pivot to all his wide receivers and work behind Garrett Wilson. I think he's the guy who trusts the most because he progresses well from the running game. He's always out there, so they can transition, play action, get him downfield. This is kind of a concept of the Nathaniel Hackett offense. I'm not going to say he's Robert Tonyan and is going to score 10-plus touchdowns with Aaron Rodgers, but he had close to 100 yards last week. So he's involved, and he's not going to go away. So, yeah, as we complain and whine about tight ends, here comes Kmet, here comes Conklin. Brock Bowers is doing it as a rookie. So just keep that in mind. Just don't pout and complain about your guys. Keep looking for new guys because there's going to be someone emerging. We've seen that in a lot of positions. Waiver wire, do not sleep on tight end. There's going to be some good values continuing to emerge there.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to our tight end ranking episode when we have to rank these guys for week 4, but at least we have a couple days to figure that all out. To end our waiver show today, let's go through some defenses we'd consider streaming. I'm shocked the Vikings are only rostered on 20% of ESPN leagues. They need to be rostered. They might be the best defense in the league. I mean, the Steelers are killing it, but the Vikings are just dominant. I mean, they just shut down the Texans offense. They play either Malik Willis, who I know had a good game last week, but it's still Malik Willis, or banged up Jordan Love. Like, the Vikings would be the number one pickup in my mind.
Yeah, everyone wants to play the streaming game, but sometimes a defense comes along like this where you say, or the Steelers even, right? Just keep playing them every week. I mean, they just are good. They have sources to rush the pass. What we're looking for in a lot of defenses, sacks, takeaways. What does this team have? A lot of good pass rushers and forcing turnovers. They're aggressive. So that you have to look at it that way. Know your scoring system. If you've got that scoring system, Vikings, I mean, they took down the 49ers. I mean, what other matchup do you need, right? That and the Texans back-to-back weeks, whatever do you need to prove that this defense is going to make plays against anyone? So sometimes they come along. This is the defenses that are golden. So I think they're not just guys that you want to have on your roster, but just play every week until they show you otherwise. I mean, what other offense is going to slow them down? So keep that in mind. I also like the Dolphins this week at home against the Titans. You could also play the Titans against the Dolphins. We'll see what the quarterback situation goes, but I do like the home standing kind of night defense there this week. The Chiefs are going to get a break on the road against the Chargers, so a lot of good stuff. Is there any other defense you like this week other than that kind of those matchups take advantage of bad quarterbacks?
Yeah. If Justin Herbert's out, then the Chiefs become a great defensive option here against Taylor Heineke. But one I want to bring up, and this is if all the good ones are gone, right?
Yeah.
You got to figure out defense deep, or maybe you're playing DFS. Raiders defense, right? They got embarrassed by the Panthers last week. Antonio Pierce is calling out his team, and they get the Browns. And Deshaun Watson has been terrible, right? And the Browns offense has been terrible. I would not be surprised if the Raiders end up having a really good defensive game after being embarrassed last week.
Yeah, and don't sleep on the Browns on the other side. They also were embarrassed, but Myles Garrett is hurting. Let's watch the Max Crosby injury, who's hurting. So obviously you can't play defenses without their best defensive players that are disrupting things. But you're right. I think the Raiders are going to play much better this week. The Browns can give it up a little bit. So that could be a source of some ugly defensive stuff on top of the Packers-Vikings game this week. So just keep in mind the defenses are ahead of the offenses. So you can find a good value, and it could be someone you're not even expecting. I mean, the Broncos were good last week, right? So just look, where can I get a matchup? Where can I get the plays need to get me fantasy points? And that's where you're going to find a defense.
Yeah, and make sure the Vikings are not still sitting out there on your league. They should be rostered 100%. That is it for today's show. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We will be back tomorrow starting our rankings back up for week 4. We'll get to our running back and quarterback rankings on Wednesday, and then wide receiver and tight end rankings on Thursday. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.